The night my husband kicked me out, everything felt like it collapsed under my feet, my home, my security, my dignity, and as I dragged my small suitcase down the cold sidewalk, I kept asking myself how a marriage could break so ruthlessly, so suddenly, without even a moment to breathe. But life doesn't wait for breath, does it? It squeezes you until you reach for things you never thought you would, and that's exactly what happened when I pulled out my father's old card. Yes, that card, the one he told me never to use unless I had no other choice, the one I had buried at the bottom of my life like a memory I didn't want to feel again. And as I stood outside the bank door the next morning with trembling hands, I couldn't help but wonder if this small piece of plastic would save me or destroy me. My heart pounded so loudly I could feel it in my throat as I pushed the glass door open, and for a moment I imagined my father standing next to me, nodding, telling me to be strong, but the truth was I had no idea what I was about to walk into, no idea that a single swipe could trigger something far bigger than financial help. When I approached the counter and slid the card forward, the teller took it with a polite smile that faded the second she glanced at the number, and before I could ask what was wrong, her face drained of color. Like my father had carved it with a pen without leaving ink, forcing anyone who sought the truth to look deeper, feel the paper, notice the shadows. The triangle sat near an industrial area I vaguely recognized, a district known for old warehouses and abandoned rail offices. The kind of place someone could hide something, or someone, for years without being noticed. The thought made my skin crawl. Was my father involved with people who used places like that? Or was he hiding something from them? I didn't know which possibility scared me more. As I folded the map again and pushed myself away from the fence, a sudden gust of wind swept through the empty street, carrying with it a distant metallic clatter that made me jump. I spun around, heart racing, half expecting to see the intruder emerging from the shadows, but the street remained empty, silent except for the faint echo of my own breathing. Still, the unease didn't fade, because silence wasn't safety. Silence was cover. I forced myself to move, heading toward the main road where flickering streetlights painted long, unsettling shadows across the cracked pavement. Every passing car felt like it slowed near me. Every dark window felt like eyes watching, every rustling bush felt like someone waiting for the moment I let my guard down. I didn't know who they were, but I understood one thing with absolute clarity: they weren't improvising. They weren't guessing. They knew my name, my face, my habits, my history. They knew where I would run. So I had to think like someone who wasn't me. I leaned against that broken fence, chest burning, lungs clawing for air. But even as my body begged for rest, my mind refused to slow down, because the truth felt heavier with every breath I took. Running wasn't escape, it was only delay, and whoever had been in that house wasn't a lone threat. They were part of something organized, something watchful, something that had been waiting for me far longer than I had been aware of their existence. The second key in my hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds, its cold metal pressing into my palm like a silent promise that my father hadn't abandoned me to this nightmare. He had prepared for it, step by step, clue by clue, trusting that if the day ever came when I was forced into his hidden world, I would be able to follow the trail he left behind. But what trail? Where did this key belong? The map only led to the house I had fled, no second location circled, no obvious next step, nothing but a tangle of coded symbols I didn't understand. And yet, the more I stared at the map, the more one thing bothered me. The red circle wasn't a perfect circle. It had thick points and thin points, almost like arrows pointing outward. A pattern. A direction. My father never did anything by accident. With trembling fingers, I unfolded the map completely, flattening it against the fence under the faint glow of a broken streetlight, and that's when I saw it, another faint marking, barely visible unless the paper was fully stretched. A small line extending from the original circle toward a point on the edge of the map, where a second symbol, tiny, almost invisible, waited like a whisper. Not a circle. A triangle. A destination. My breath hitched as I traced it with my fingertip, realizing that the line between the 2 points wasn't drawn in ink, it was pressed into the paper. Like a warning and a blessing all at once, and I ran without direction, without breath, without thought, just ran until the house disappeared behind me and the sound of footsteps faded. Only when I reached the edge of the old neighborhood did I stop, collapsing against a broken fence, my chest heaving. And as I looked down at the second key glinting in my shaking hand, one truth settled into my bones: whatever my father was part of, it wasn't over. It had only just begun, and now they were coming for me. I knew if I stayed still, they would eventually find me. If I ran, I could be caught before I reached the door. If I screamed, no one would hear me in this forgotten part of the city. My mind raced in frantic circles until it landed on the black device, the blinking red light, the single beep, the signal. If that device alerted someone that I found the cabinet, perhaps it also alerted someone else that I was in danger. Someone my father trusted. Someone who hadn't arrived yet, or who might already be close. But trusting unseen help felt like betting my life on a ghost. Another floorboard creaked, closer now, almost right outside the room, and I felt panic coil up my spine so violently I almost ran blindly into the intruder's path. But then my fingers brushed the edge of the map in my pocket, and I remembered the second key. There had to be more, another location, another clue, another door my father needed me to open. This house wasn't the destination. It was just the beginning. As the intruder's shadow stretched across the doorway, growing larger, clearer, more horrifying, I forced my trembling legs to move, inching silently toward the far corner where a narrow back passage disappeared into darkness. My breath trembled in my throat as I slipped into the tight corridor, the walls pressing against my shoulders like the house itself was trying to hide me. Behind me, the intruder stepped into the main room, their flashlight sweeping across the steel cabinet, and that was when I heard it, a low, frustrated exhale, as if they had arrived seconds too late. That sound gave me a tiny sliver of hope. They didn't know where I was yet. I followed the narrow passage until I reached a rusted back door. My fingers fumbled with the bolt, my heart slamming against my ribs as I imagined the intruder turning, noticing the sounds, realizing where I'd gone, but by some miracle, the bolt slid free with a soft click. I slipped outside into a small overgrown yard, the cold wind slapping my face. The moment those heavy footsteps echoed through the front room, every drop of blood in my veins seemed to freeze, and I felt myself shrinking back into the shadows of the dim, dusty house, desperate to become invisible even though my pounding heartbeat felt loud enough for the intruder to hear. I clutched the second key so tightly its sharp edges bit into my palm, grounding me just enough to keep my legs from giving out, but terror still swarmed through me like a living thing, twisting my breath into silent gasps. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, someone confident, someone who wasn't afraid of being heard, someone who already knew I was here and didn't care if I felt the fear crawling up my spine. A faint beam of light swept across the room as the intruder's flashlight cut through the dust-filled air, and I pressed myself against the steel cabinet, praying that the darkness around me would swallow me whole. I remembered the photographs, the proof that someone had been watching me for years, and suddenly it didn't feel like one person was after me. It felt like an entire shadow hovering above my life, waiting for the exact moment to strike. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been waiting for me to use that card? My father must have known, must have spent his final years terrified that the day would come when his unfinished battle would land on my shoulders. And now it had. The intruder's shoes scraped against the floorboards, sending shivers racing up my arms as the flashlight beam grazed the cabinet, the walls, the floor, everything inching closer to where I hid. I was now part of whatever he had tried to shield me from. Panic clawed at my throat, and I backed away from the device, horrified, until suddenly a soft creak echoed from the front of the house, footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy enough to vibrate through the rotten floorboards. Someone was inside. Someone had followed me. Someone who knew exactly what I had just discovered. My heart thundered so violently I could barely think, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't supposed to be alive the moment this cabinet was opened, and whoever stepped into the house was here to correct that. Or mysterious places, they were of me. Me as a child. Me in high school. Me at my wedding. Me standing outside my home on random days I never realized I was being watched. Every picture stamped with dates, coded numbers, and symbols I didn't understand. Someone had been documenting my entire life. Not my father. Someone else. My skin crawled as I flipped through the images, each one more invasive than the last, and at the bottom of the stack lay a final picture, me stepping into the bank just hours earlier. Hours. That meant someone wasn't just watching my past, they were watching my present. A wave of cold panic crashed over me so hard I had to grip the cabinet door to keep myself from collapsing, because whoever was tracking me knew where I was, knew what I was doing, knew that the card had been used, knew I had opened the folder. My father's message wasn't a warning for someday, it was a warning for right now. My breath came in sharp, uneven gasps as I grabbed the second key and turned to the black device, unsure whether to touch it, smash it, or run from it, but before I could decide, the blinking blue light changed to solid red, and a quiet tone, barely audible, beeped once. A signal. A notification. To someone. Somewhere. That I had found the cabinet. That I had seen the pictures. That I was no longer just the daughter of a man with secrets. The words on that fragile note, "They know you exist," hung in the stale air like a threat with its breath pressed against my neck, and for a long moment I just stood there, frozen between terror and disbelief, trying to understand how my quiet, gentle father could have possibly been part of something that placed me on someone's radar long before I even knew I was being watched. My knees felt weak as I approached the steel cabinet, the code panel glowing faintly like an artificial heartbeat waiting for the wrong touch to set off an alarm, and I could almost hear my father's voice, not gentle this time but stern, warning me that opening this box would change everything I knew about him, and possibly everything I knew about myself. My hand hovered over the panel, shaking uncontrollably, because what if I entered the wrong code? What if the cabinet was trapped? What if opening it revealed something I wasn't prepared to see? But then another fear rose louder than all the others. What if leaving it unopened left me blind to whatever danger was already unfolding around me? I forced myself to look more carefully, tracing the edges of the note, and there, just barely visible beneath the tape, was a faint imprint of numbers, as if my father had pressed hard while writing, leaving the code hidden in the paper fibers. My pulse hammered wildly as I typed the numbers into the panel, each beep slicing through the silence, and when the final key clicked, the lock released with a soft hiss that felt far too ominous for something so small. The cabinet doors creaked open, and inside lay a thick folder wrapped in plastic, a second metal key much larger than the first, and a small black device with a blinking blue light that made my stomach twist because it felt like it was alive, like something was already in motion. I pulled out the folder first, my hands trembling as I peeled back the plastic, and when I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. The photographs inside weren't of strangers. Same strange symbol engraved on the document inside the box. My breath caught. I inserted the key into the small lock beneath it, and as the tumblers clicked open, a cold wave of dread washed through me. The door creaked inward with a long, tired groan, and the smell of old wood and forgotten years mixed with something else, something metallic, something that made the air tense and heavy. Inside, the house was dim, dust dancing through slices of cold light, and the floorboards creaked under my feet as if warning me not to step any further. But I couldn't stop now. My father brought me here. My father wanted me to open this door. And as I walked deeper into the house, every muscle in my body trembling, I saw it, at the center of the room, beneath a dim beam of sunlight, stood a locked steel cabinet with a code panel, and taped to it, yellowed and fragile, was another note in my father's handwriting: "If you are reading this, they know you exist." And in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just waiting, it was coming for me. Ask for the second key. Why would he leave such a cryptic warning? And what was waiting at that red circle on the map? The address wasn't familiar, no family home, no childhood location, no office he ever mentioned, just a street name I didn't recognize and a number written in his shaky handwriting. As the bus pulled deeper into the city, panic and curiosity battled inside me until the panic started to win, because what if going to that address put me directly into the danger he tried to protect me from? What if the people he warned me about were already tracking me? But then the other side of me, the side that had nothing left to lose, rose up and reminded me that my father didn't do things without reason. He wasn't reckless. And if he left a key and a map and a warning, it meant he had prepared for this moment long before I ever knew I'd need it. With that thought swallowing my fear just enough to breathe again, I followed the map toward the outskirts of the city, where the buildings grew older and quieter, until the bus reached the final stop and I stepped off into a neighborhood that looked forgotten by time. The house at the marked address stood at the end of a cracked sidewalk, a small, boarded-up structure with faded paint and windows clouded by dust, and for a moment I wondered if I had walked into the wrong place, if this abandoned shell could possibly hold the secret my father died guarding. But then I saw it, the tiny metal plate near the door, scratched and nearly invisible, with the cold air in the alley hit me like a warning, sharp and urgent, but I didn't have time to breathe it in. Every instinct inside me screamed to move, to not look back, to not give whoever was asking questions even a second to catch up, yet my legs felt like they were made of cement as I stepped into that narrow passageway with the black box clutched against my chest, the map crumpled in my hand, and the brass key digging into my palm as if trying to remind me that my father's message wasn't a suggestion but a command issued from beyond the grave. The alley stretched long and empty, a thin ribbon of shadow between buildings, and for a moment I wondered if the manager was exaggerating or if danger was actually closing in on me, but then I heard it, a faint, quick set of footsteps at the far end, echoing off the bricks in a rhythm too sharp, too purposeful to be casual, and my heart lurched into my throat as I realized I wasn't imagining it. Someone was coming. Without thinking, I turned left and pressed myself against the cold wall, praying they hadn't seen me, but fear pushed me forward, urging me down the alley, across a small parking lot, and toward the street where people moved like they had no idea someone's life had just been split open. I blended into the crowd as best I could, but every face I passed looked like a possible threat, every glance felt suspicious, every pause felt like someone watching me from behind tinted windows or through cameras I couldn't see. When I finally reached a bus stop 2 blocks down, I forced myself not to look back as I stepped onto the bus and sank into a seat, but the entire ride, I couldn't stop replaying my father's words in my head, "You are in danger. Someone is already asking questions about the card." My stomach dropped. Someone? Asking already? For me? For my father? I grabbed the map, the key, and the box, feeling the weight of danger settle over me like an invisible cloak, and as the manager hurried me toward a dim hallway behind the office, I couldn't stop the fear climbing up my spine, fear that whatever waited at the red-circled address wasn't just the truth, but the truth my father died trying to keep hidden. And as the door opened to the back alley, cold air hitting my face, one thought echoed in my mind louder than all the others: what in the world had my father been involved in, and how was I suddenly in the middle of it? Yes, but beneath it lay a folded map marked with a red circle around an address I had never seen before, and next to it a document stamped with a symbol I recognized only from stories, a confidential seal used by a private, high-level investigative body my father had never, ever spoken about. My father? Connected to something classified? Why? How? The question spun in my mind faster than I could control, and the manager leaned forward as if afraid someone outside might hear. "Your father left instructions," he whispered. "When the card is used, you're to take this key and go to the marked location." Whatever he left there, it was important enough that he warned us not to interfere. But that word, danger, clung to me like a shadow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just uncovering money or secrets, I was stepping into something my father had been protecting me from my entire life. As I held the key in my palm, warm from the box yet chilling against my skin, 1,000 memories of my father flashed through my mind: the nights he locked his study door, the calls he always took outside, the way he sometimes paused when my mother asked about his past, little things I once brushed off as nothing. Now they looked like clues I had ignored. Before I could gather my thoughts, the manager leaned in again and whispered, "You need to leave through the back exit. Now." Because part of me needed answers more desperately than I needed safety. Inside the small office, the manager closed the blinds, locked the door, and sat across from me with a seriousness that made my stomach twist. "This card," he said slowly, sliding it across the table toward me, "should have been reported years ago. We were told, if anyone ever uses it, to notify the higher office immediately." My breath caught. Higher office? For my father? A man who never even raised his voice? My mind raced with possibilities. Was he in debt? Was he involved in something dangerous? Did he hide money he was afraid I'd discover? Or was this something else, something that explained the way he sometimes stared into the distance as if remembering a life before the one we knew? The manager continued speaking, but I barely heard him over the pounding of my own heartbeat, until he leaned forward and placed a sealed envelope in front of me, the paper yellowed with time, my father's handwriting unmistakable on the front, and I felt my entire world tilt as the manager said softly, "This was left here for the day this card was used, and it's meant only for you." And in that moment, my husband's rejection, my fear, my confusion, all vanished behind the single, terrifying question filling my mind. What did my father know that he never told me, and why did he wait until now for me to find out? Her fingers froze, and she quietly whispered to someone behind her, someone I hadn't even noticed standing there. A wave of panic wrapped around my chest. Why was she whispering? Why was she staring at me like she recognized something she shouldn't? And then I saw it, the small red light blinking on her screen, the silent alarm symbol that only appears when something is flagged for immediate internal action, and a chill raced across my spine as she excused herself and disappeared through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I stood there alone, gripping the counter, my world already shattered from the night before, and now somehow this card, this last desperate hope, was pulling me into another storm I didn't understand. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But curiosity and fear held me in place, twisting together inside me like a rope around my ribs, because what could possibly be so serious about an old card belonging to my father, a quiet man who barely spoke about his past, a man who lived simply, worked honestly, and carried secrets so silently that sometimes I wondered if he carried them even from himself. When the teller finally returned, she wasn't alone, the bank manager walked beside her, a tall man with a stiff expression that didn't match his soft words as he asked me to follow him into a private room, and though every instinct told me to say no, to turn around and escape before the situation grew darker, I followed.